Louisville, Kentucky. March 29, 1967. A hotel room door closes, and for the next 90 minutes, two men who represent opposite sides of the same war sit face to face in complete privacy, discussing whether their people's freedom requires integration or separation, nonviolence or self-defense, patience or revolution. Outside that door, America thinks these men are enemies, one preaching love, the other preaching power, one seeking seats at white lunch counters, the other rejecting the very idea of sitting next to white people at all. But inside that room, something else is happening that will only be discovered years later when FBI surveillance tapes reveal the truth. Martin Luther King Jr. and Muhammad Ali aren't enemies at all, they're friends, and their secret bond is about to become the most dangerous friendship in America. The world only knows what it sees in public, and what it sees are two black men who couldn't be more different if they tried. King is a Baptist minister from Atlanta, educated at Boston University, preaching nonviolent resistance and the dream of an integrated America where black and white children hold hands and sing together. Ali is a Muslim boxer from Louisville, mentored by Malcolm X, preaching black pride and the Nation of Islam's belief in racial separation and self-determination. King marches peacefully and gets beaten by police, then turns the other cheek and marches again. Ali refuses to march at all, saying he doesn't believe in forcing integration and doesn't want to go where he's not wanted. When reporters ask King about Ali joining the Nation of Islam in 1964, King's response is clear: when Cassius Clay joined the black Muslims and started calling himself Cassius X, he became a champion of racial segregation, and that is what we are fighting against. It seems impossible that these two men could find any common ground, let alone friendship, and yet the FBI wiretaps tell a different story entirely, one that begins years before that hotel room meeting in Louisville, before either man became the most hated figure in his own way, back when a young boxer named Cassius Clay was just starting to make waves and a Baptist minister was wondering if this brash kid might one day be useful to the cause. 1961, Las Vegas. A 19-year-old Cassius Clay is preparing for his 7th professional fight against Duke Sabdong, and his swagger and charm have already made him famous beyond the boxing ring because he doesn't just win fights, he predicts the round he'll win them in, he writes poems about his opponents, he calls himself the greatest, before he's earned the right to that title. The young fighter receives a telegram that surprises him: your youthful good humor, physical prowess, and flippant charm have made you an idol to many American young people, it reads, and then adds, may God protect you and your opponent in the coming contest. It's signed Martin Luther King Jr., and though Clay probably doesn't realize it at the time, this telegram is the beginning of something neither man could have predicted, an alliance that will eventually become so threatening to the American establishment that the FBI will devote countless hours to monitoring their every conversation, tracking their every meeting, and documenting the growing bond between the most famous preacher and the most famous fighter in the country. By 1964, Cassius Clay has done the impossible and beaten Sonny Liston to become heavyweight champion of the world, and the very next day he does something even more shocking. He announces that he's joined the Nation of Islam and is changing his name to Muhammad Ali because Cassius Clay is a slave name, and he refuses to be called by the name of a slave owner any longer. White America explodes with rage, calling him a traitor and a disgrace and demanding he be stripped of his title, and most of the civil rights establishment isn't happy either because the Nation of Islam preaches separation rather than integration, and King's entire movement is built on the opposite principle. King publicly distances himself from Ali's decision, saying he totally disagrees with the Nation of Islam's political and philosophical views, and it appears the two men are now on opposite sides of an unbridgeable divide. But then something remarkable happens that no one knows about except for the FBI agents listening to their phone calls. Ali and King start talking to each other in private, and what they discover is that despite their public disagreements about tactics and philosophy, they recognize something essential in each other that transcends those differences. The FBI wiretap from 1964 captures a phone conversation where Ali tells King that he's keeping up with King's work and that MLK is his brother and is with him 100% but can't take any chances, and then Ali adds a warning that will become famous decades later: watch out for them Whitties. It's a conversation between two men who understand they're both being watched, both being threatened, both receiving death threats by the hundreds, and both standing at the center of a storm that could destroy them at any moment. What bonds them isn't agreement on tactics or philosophy, they still disagree fundamentally on whether the path forward requires integration or separation, but rather a shared understanding of what it costs to stand up for black dignity in 1960s America, when standing up means making yourself a target for everyone who profits from keeping black people down. King knows what it's like to have the FBI tap his phones and his hotel rooms, to receive letters threatening to kill his children, to watch his house get bombed while his family sleeps inside, and Ollie knows the same terror, because once you become visible enough to matter, once your voice becomes loud enough to inspire people, the machinery of oppression turns its full attention toward silence. 1966 arrives and brings with it the issue that will transform their private friendship into a public alliance that neither man can hide anymore: the Vietnam War and Muhammad Ali's refusal to fight in it. When Ali receives his draft notice and announces that he won't serve because "I ain't got no quarrel with them Viet Cong," and "no Viet Cong ever called me an asterisk 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 R," America's hatred toward him reaches a fever pitch that makes the anger over his name change look mild by comparison. They call him a coward, a traitor, un-American, and demand he be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And at first King stays quiet about the war, even though he privately agrees with Ali's position, because King's advisors warn him that taking a public stand against the war will alienate President Johnson and destroy any hope of passing more civil rights legislation. But Ali's courage in standing alone against the draft, knowing it will cost him his title and his freedom and millions of dollars, does something to King that changes his calculation about what matters more, political expediency or moral truth, and in 1967, King makes the decision that will turn most of America against him just as surely as it turned against Ali. April 4, 1967, Riverside Church in New York. King delivers the speech, Beyond Vietnam, where he condemns the war as immoral and unjust and declares that he can no longer remain silent while America drops bombs on poor brown people in Southeast Asia, when poor black people in America still can't vote or eat at lunch counters or live in decent housing. The backlash is immediate and brutal. The Washington Post accuses him of diminishing his moral authority, the NAACP says he's hurting the civil rights cause, and even black leaders who supported him on segregation tell him he's made a terrible mistake by mixing civil rights with foreign policy. But King doesn't back down, and when reporters ask him why he's focusing on Vietnam instead of staying in his lane, King quotes the man who made him brave enough to speak out in the first place. Like Muhammad Ali puts it, "We are all, black and brown and poor, victims of the same system of oppression." It's the first time King has publicly allied himself with Ali, and it marks the moment when their secret friendship becomes an open partnership that will cost them both dearly. March 29, 1967, 5 days before King's Riverside Church speech. Ali's hometown of Louisville, Kentucky. King is in town leading protests for fair housing legislation because his brother A.D. King lives in Louisville as pastor of Zion Baptist Church and has been organizing against housing segregation that keeps black families trapped in deteriorating neighborhoods while white families flee to the suburbs. King is staying at a downtown hotel, and Ali comes to visit him there, and the two men sit together for 90 minutes talking about everything: the war, the movement, the cost of standing for principle when principle means losing everything. We don't know exactly what they said to each other in that hotel room because even the FBI couldn't bug a private hotel room without a warrant, but we know what happened immediately afterward when they walked out together to face reporters who couldn't believe what they were seeing. The press conference after their private meeting is captured in photographs that show Ali and King standing side by side, both smiling, both at ease with each other in a way that confuses everyone watching, because these two men aren't supposed to be friends, they're supposed to represent competing visions of black liberation. The reporters ask what they discussed, and Ali gives an answer that makes King laugh out loud: "Nothing, just friends, just like Khrushchev and Kennedy and everybody," Ali says, invoking the Soviet premier and the American president who managed to find common ground despite representing opposing ideologies. When all of the politicians, all of the white racists come together, although they believe different, they think different, whites can come together and discuss the common cause, Ali continues, but whenever a few of us come together, the world is shook up. He's calling out the double standard perfectly. White people with vastly different political views can meet and work together without anyone questioning their motives or loyalty, but when two black men with different approaches to liberation sit down together, suddenly it's treated as scandalous or dangerous or somehow illegitimate. Then Ali does something that makes the moment even more powerful. He looks at King standing next to him and says 4 words that will echo for decades: "Still brothers. Still brothers." It's a simple statement, but it contains within it an entire philosophy about what unity actually means, because Ali isn't saying they agree on everything, isn't pretending their tactical differences have disappeared, isn't abandoning his belief in black nationalism or his membership in the Nation of Islam. What he's saying is that those differences don't make them enemies, that 2 black men can disagree profoundly about how to achieve liberation while still recognizing each other as brothers in the same fight, and that the white establishment's desperate need to keep them divided stems from fear of what might happen if all black people, integrationists and separatists, nonviolent protesters and armed defenders, Christians and Muslims, recognize their common enemy and their common cause. The day after their hotel meeting, King and Ali appear together at a fair housing rally in Louisville, and this time their alliance is even more explicit because Ali stands before the crowd and says directly to King with cameras rolling, "In your struggle for justice, freedom, and equality, I am with you." It's a remarkable moment because it represents Ali publicly endorsing King's integrationist civil rights work despite the friendship costs both men dearly, just as they knew it would, because taking principled stands always costs more than people imagine it will, and in their case the price includes FBI surveillance that intensifies after they ally themselves publicly, death threats that increase in frequency and specificity after they speak out against the war together, and a level of hatred for mainstream America that turns them both into pariahs in their own country during their own lifetimes. By the time Ali is convicted of draft evasion and stripped of his boxing license in every state, King sends him a telegram in jail that reads, "Hope you are comfortable not suffering," which is the kind of message you send to someone you consider not just an ally but a genuine friend. And when King is arrested in 1967 for organizing what police call an unpermitted protest, Ali returns the gesture by checking in on him and offering support, even though associating with King at that point means associating with someone most of America considers a troublemaker and an agitator and potentially a communist sympathizer. April 4, 1968, Memphis, Tennessee. Martin Luther King Jr. steps out onto the balcony of the Lorraine Motel and a bullet ends his life at age 39. Cutting short not just his work but his friendship with Ali and leaving the boxer to carry forward alone the bond they built together. Ali later says, "Dr. King was my great black brother. He'll be remembered for thousands of years to come," and there's a weight to those words because Ali understands that he's lost not just an ally in the struggle but one of the few people who truly understood what it meant to stand at the center of that particular storm, to be hated by millions for standing up for what's right, to know that every time you speak truth to power you're risking not just your career but your life. The assassination proves Ali was right when he warned King to watch out for them widdies, because ultimately that's exactly what killed him, a white supremacist who couldn't tolerate the idea of black people claiming their full humanity and dignity, who couldn't accept King's vision of a beloved community where black and white people recognized each other as equals. What's remarkable looking back is how America's opinion of both men transformed after they lost the ability to speak, King through assassination, Ali through Parkinson's disease that gradually silenced his voice and slowed his body. While they were alive and active and challenging the systems of oppression, America hated them with a passion that included death threats and FBI surveillance and constant attempts to discredit or destroy them. A 1966 Gallup poll showed that 63% of Americans had an unfavorable opinion of King, and if a similar poll had been taken of Ali during the Vietnam War years, the number would have been even higher. But after King was safely dead and couldn't challenge anyone anymore, America decided to honor him with a national holiday, and after Ali was safely silenced by Parkinson's and couldn't box or speak effectively anymore, America decided to call him the greatest and celebrate him as an American icon. It's a pattern that repeats throughout history. Radicals and revolutionaries are hated and suppressed while they're dangerous, then honored and sanitized after they're safely neutralized, with all the sharp edges filed off and all the uncomfortable truths about what they actually stood for carefully forgotten. The friendship between Ali and King teaches us something essential about how social movements actually work, which is that unity doesn't require uniformity, that people can disagree profoundly about tactics while still recognizing they're fighting the same enemy, and that the establishment's greatest fear is always that oppressed people will stop fighting each other over their differences and start organizing together around their common interests. When King and Ali found common ground on Vietnam despite disagreeing about integration versus separation, they demonstrated something powerful, that working class and poor people of all races being sent to die in an imperial war abroad while being denied basic rights at home is an issue that transcends tactical disagreements about how to fight oppression, and that solidarity across those differences is not just possible but essential. The FBI understood this better than most historians because that's exactly why they surveilled both men so intensively, bugged their phones, tracked their meetings, and documented their growing friendship. They knew that if King's followers and Ali's followers ever truly united despite their differences, if integrationists and separatists and Christians and Muslims all recognized their common cause, the resulting movement would be unstoppable. We discovered their friendship only because of those FBI wiretaps, which themselves only became public because of activists who broke into an FBI office on March 8, 1971, the night of the first Ali Frazier fight, when they correctly guessed the guards would be distracted along with the rest of the country. Those activists stole thousands of documents proving illegal FBI surveillance of civil rights leaders and anti-war activists, and among those documents were the wiretap transcripts showing conversations between King and Ali that proved they weren't enemies at all but rather friends who supported each other privately while maintaining different public positions because both understood that diversity of tactics strengthens movements rather than weakening them. What the FBI meant to use as evidence of wrongdoing, recordings of two men they considered threats to national security talking to each other and supporting each other, instead became evidence of something beautiful, which is that two people can disagree about almost everything while still seeing each other's humanity and recognizing each other's courage and standing together when it matters most. The hotel room in Louisville where they met for 90 minutes on March 29, 1967, still exists, though there's no plaque marking what happened there, no historical marker explaining that this is where two of the most important figures in 20th-century American history sat together as friends while the world outside assumed they were enemies. And maybe that's fitting because their friendship was always supposed to be private anyway, a bond between two men who understood costs and sacrifices that most people never have to contemplate, two men who chose principles over popularity and truth over comfort and who paid prices that included losing their livelihoods, their freedom, and ultimately, in King's case, their lives. Here's what they understood that most people still don't: courage isn't agreeing with everyone who fights on your side, courage is recognizing that people can fight on the same side while using different weapons and different tactics and different philosophies. King believed in nonviolence and integration, Ali believed in self-defense and separation, and yet when it came to the most important question of their time, whether America had the right to force black men to fight in Vietnam while denying them rights at home, they stood together and said no, and that unity across their differences terrified the establishment more than either man standing alone ever could have. When Ali said, "Still brothers," with King standing next to him, he was articulating a vision of solidarity that's desperately needed in every era because movements only win when they figure out how to build coalitions across their differences rather than splintering into ever smaller factions that fight each other more than they fight oppression. So here's the question for you: who have you written off as an enemy because they disagree with you about tactics while actually sharing your ultimate goal? What movement have you weakened by demanding everyone agree with you about strategy rather than uniting around shared purpose? Because if Martin Luther King Jr. and Muhammad Ali, two men who disagreed about almost everything regarding how to achieve black liberation, could recognize each other as brothers and support each other and stand together when it mattered most, then maybe the rest of us can learn to distinguish between people who disagree about methods versus people who oppose our actual goals. The establishment counted on King and Ali staying divided, counted on their followers fighting each other instead of the system, and the fact that they refused to play that game is exactly why both men are remembered as heroes while the people who tried to keep them divided are remembered, when they're remembered at all, as obstacles that history rightfully swept aside. March 29, 1967. A hotel room door closes. Two men sit down as friends. And for 90 minutes, the impossible happens: the integrationist and the separatist, the Christian and the Muslim, the preacher and the fighter find common ground that will terrify everyone who profits from keeping them apart. Still brothers. Still brothers. How long will it take for the rest of us to figure out what they knew?